Hey guys, welcome back to The Binger. Rick Harrison has made a pretty penny as the owner of the world-famous gold and silver pawn shop. However, things don't always go to plan. The Pawn Stars might be professionals, but sometimes they're prone to stupidity too, just like the rest of us. Scammers often try to sell dodgy items to them, and they have been known to fall for it. Let's take a look. Rick isn't a stupid guy. In fact, he's super intelligent. You don't get to be where he is by being a complete dope. However, it's not always easy to spot what's worthy of money and what isn't. Over the years, he's gotten pretty good at separating the junk from the gold, but not this time. When one customer appeared in the store wanting to sell a Wells Fargo ball and chain, it seemed intriguing. Who wouldn't want something that cool, right? Rick had a feeling that it looked like a fake as the item seemed way too advanced for the time period that it claimed to be from. Despite knowing this, the Pawn Star still shelled out an impressive $450 for it. The seller walked away happy, perhaps knowing that he had just made a buck out of junk. When the guys got an expert to look at it, it turned out to be worth nothing. The Beard of Knowledge dubbed it an absolute fantasy piece which wouldn't get a single dime at auction. It's brutal, but Rick took a massive gamble, and he knew it. Why? Maybe he thought it would make good TV. When it comes to selling items, it's not always about what it's physically worth, but it's the history behind it. That being said, some of the most valuable things are so expensive because of who they once belonged to. And this Hendrix guitar seemed to be the full package, even coming in with documentation to prove that Jimmy once held it in his arms. Like any self-respecting pawn shop owner, Rick called in an expert to get a proper evaluation. When it checked out, the price tag went up pretty spectacularly to a cool $1 million. Rick offered the seller $600,000 for it, but they didn't want to take anything less than $750,000. Clearly, they didn't need the money and were willing to wait. The gents couldn't reach an agreement, and the guitar went away to be listed at auction. So, no scam there, but this is where things get a little weird. The axe was sold, but the buyer was none other than the expert that Rick called in to appraise it. Something sounds a little suspicious there, doesn't it? Did the expert purposely put a higher price tag on it to force it to auction? Stranger things have happened. There's a lot of money to be made in cars, but only if you buy one that is in just the right condition. Buy one in tip-top shape, and it's unlikely that you're going to pay a price low enough to make a profit. Buy one that's fit for the scrapyard, and you'll end up paying more to fix it than it's worth. Rick learned that one the hard way with this Austin Healey Sprite. As the vehicle was vintage and incredibly rare, Rick was immediately excited. Only when he went to turn on the engine, it wouldn't work. The seller brushed off the problem, saying that it was an easy fix, but he just didn't want to do it himself. And thinking that the guy was genuine, our favorite wheeler dealer shook hands for $5,000. It would turn out to be a very expensive deal, and not in a good way. Rick brought the car to his mechanic, who gave him the bad news. In order to fix the car and make it sellable, it would cost around $6,000. That's $1,000 more than Rick paid for it. If that's not a scam, then what is? Ouch. It's truly insane what signed items can go for. That's why there's so many forgeries in the world. If people can get away with passing off something as real, then they will. There's just so much money to be made from it. And there are millions of vulnerable people out there. It's sad, but true. And in this case, Rick and the gang were impressed when they were presented with a Willie Mays baseball jersey. Although it looked like it could be real, there were some telltale signs that Mays may not have worn it. Chumlee, the resident idiot of the shop, pointed out that it was clean, and surely to have been worn in a game it must have been roughed up a little bit, right? Still, Rick's son Corey liked the item, even though it didn't have a certificate of authenticity. He knew it was a risk, but he still bought the jersey for an astonishing $31,000. That's an eye-watering amount of money. What's more, they tried to sell it on for $80,000. When no one was interested in it, they sent it to auction to be sold for $19,000. That's a hell of a lot of money for something someone's grandma probably put together in a sewing room. James Bond can do a lot of things. He's a spy, he's a lover, he's great with a martini. What he isn't, as far as we know, is a rock star musician. Rick loves music and is a sucker for the rich history that comes along with it. And it was a vintage model, which meant it was certainly worth a decent amount of money. It's just not worth what the Pawn Stars paid for it. The two gents settled on $55,000. Rick was happy to pay that much money because it came with a list of songs that had been recorded with the instrument. While most of the songs weren't all that interesting, one stood out: the James Bond theme song. Maybe that's what inspired the shop owner to put a hefty price tag of $90,000 on it. As you can imagine, it didn't gain much interest as no one really cared about its history. Rick eventually managed to shift it, but for nowhere near the amount that he hoped. Still, sometimes something is better than nothing, right? Anyone can walk into a pawn shop and sell stuff, but the paperwork has to be filled out. While the Pawn Stars try to take precautions against buying stolen property, it doesn't always work out. In the mid-90s, Rick purchased a shekel of tire, a silver coin that dated all the way back to 130 BC. It was a cool item to have on the books, but it came with baggage. After the sale, it was discovered that the coin had been stolen. Not by the dude who sold it to him, but somewhere along the line. The original owner was happy to let Rick keep it because he had already recuperated his losses through insurance. So there's one scam going on there in the background, but it turned out that Rick also paid too much for the coin. He handed over $1,600 for it when the going rate is just $1,200. Because the tire had also been cleaned, that detracted from its value. Was it a big loss? No, but it's not every day that you have a stolen coin mentioned in the Bible falling onto your countertop, is it? Here's another one for the sports fans coming in hot. Shoeless Joe Jackson was one of the baseball greats, so memorabilia concerning him often fetches a pretty penny. One seller brought in a book called Say It Ain't So, Joe, which he believed to have been signed by the player. Rick wanted the item to be genuine so badly that he pretty much conned himself into buying it. Jackson's signature is among the rarest out there because he couldn't read or write. Despite knowing this, the guys bought it anyway for a handsome $13,000. For some reason, the experts were only brought in after the purchase had been made. Not one, but two professionals had deemed the signature a big fat phony, and a bad one at that. Rick got absolutely nothing from the deal, aside from an old dusty book and a big punch in the ego. His dad, his son, and Chumlee all laughed at him for falling for one of the oldest tricks. But will he learn? Probably not. There will always be more fakes, more wasted money, more dodgy dealings. We can't blame a guy for trying though, because if it was real, he would be the one laughing as he counted mountains of cash. The world-famous gold and silver pawn shop has been in the family for generations. Corey basically grew up in the place as it was where his dad Rick worked. That doesn't mean that he was always a dab hand at things though. He had his fair share of losses too, especially early on. When he started working the night shift alone in his late teens, word on the street started to travel fast. Corey was duped 6 times in 1 week, buying fake Rolexes from a few different sellers. His mistake cost the business $4,000, which anyone else would have been fired for. Thankfully, as the years roll by, Corey is much better at his job and is able to avoid any huge errors. For the most part anyway. These days, it's Chumlee who ends up putting his foot in it more than anyone else, and not Corey. Let that be a lesson to you though if you're thinking about opening a pawn business. Don't let anyone know that you don't know what you're doing. Before you know it, you'll have more fake watches on your books than you can shake a stick at. Let's rewind to a few decades ago to the dawn of the cubic zirconia. Businesses these days may be old hat at separating the fake diamonds from the real ones, but it wasn't always so. When they first hit the market, pawn shops across the world were getting stung. The old man was hit so badly at the time that he ended up handing over around $30,000 for cubic zirconias. It wasn't his fault, and he certainly wasn't the only one, but that's an astronomical amount of money to lose. Back then, it was worth even more than it is today. Thankfully for the next generation of Pawn Stars, they've all been trained on how to tell the difference between a wannabe diamond and the real thing. At least this one wasn't down to stupidity or buying something on a whim. The old man was good at his job and really old school, so it wasn't often that things got past him. It's one of those rare instances that says more about the time period than the Pawn Stars' buying and selling skills. When things don't sell for the store, they've got no choice but to haul the items to auction. It's either that or they sit collecting dust, and that's not making anybody any money, is it? Sometimes things go really well under the hammer, but other times, well, it's just a disaster. Rick took a 1940s Indian motorcycle with a sidecar and the white Fender Stratocaster we mentioned earlier to be sold. While he did walk away without them, he also walked away without a whole lot of cash. He lost a whopping $29,000 on the motorcycle and an eye-watering $35,000 on the guitar. Other items also sold at a loss, reportedly tallying up to a negative of $100,000. Ouch. Some fans thought the news was karma coming back to bite him in the butt. After all, Rick has been known to pay peanuts for something only to have it earn him some serious cash on the backside. It must have been a bitter pill to swallow for the businessman, but it certainly didn't keep him down for long. Rick always ends up on the top in the end, even if there are a few setbacks along the way. Can you remember a loss other than the ones that we've mentioned? Sound off below. Before you go, be sure to give this video a big thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Until next time, thanks for watching.